And welcome to Insight, and I'm Paul Arthur. Looking forward to your input into the program. A little later, we'll open up our calls, our phone lines as always, talking about stress today. What causes stress in your life? We all have some stress, no two ways about that. And how do you deal with it? Life is full of stress, right? Relationships, whether that's with your spouse or your kids, your parents, your coworkers, right? And then change happens. Just happens. It's becoming normal more and more these days. Maybe a couple of generations ago we had less change, but man, your job changes, there's financial stress, all these kinds of things, right? So how do you actually deal with it? I think there's a couple of practical things that tie in with it. Everything from diet to exercise. I mean, that's going to be key. Getting enough sleep. Those kinds of things are certainly part of it. Scripture, of course, tells us not to worry. Easier said than done, right? But it's bringing those things to the cross, dropping it off, and letting the bigger ox, if you will, again, Scripture talks about that. My yoke is easy. Well, it talks about being yoked to Jesus Christ. They're really the picture of two oxen walking together, but the bigger one's carrying the big load. When you're kind of coming alongside doing what you can, but we're letting Jesus do the heavy rowing, if you will, right? Those of you who are maybe dealing with that right now, and I would probably say that includes most of you. You're welcome to jump in here a little later again with your questions and your suggestions. Some of you have learned how to handle stress well. Some of us don't have a clue, and it's affecting even our health, right? So our guest today is Ken Keis. He's an expert in training organizations and individuals as well, how to reach their full potential. Does a lot of work in the corporate world with churches as well. And he's actually an expert on personality types. You might remember last time he was here, we did this book, and it was a lot of fun. Why Can't You Be More Like Me? Is talking about the different personality types, and especially in the workplace and so forth. And he's also authored another book. Well, it's actually a little booklet that can be used as an individual or also for various workplaces here. Stress Indicator and Health Planner is the title here, and it just helps people recognize and deal with the stress in their lives. All right, so you can get your copy online at kenkeis.com or crgleader.com. crgleader.com. Now, good to have you with us again, Ken.
Well, it's great to be here, Paul.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. We had a lot of fun last time, I know.
We did.
I guess, I was saying in the intro there that most of us are stressed. I mean, is that accurate? I mean, are most people stressed?
Well, just a precursor to that, you were mentioning earlier, what does stress cost us?
Yeah.
And what does stress cause in us? And the last research is that 90 to 95% of illnesses are stress related or lifestyle related.
90%, yeah.
So when we think about how important is this topic for us, it is critical. Critical stress, those pieces. And the last research is that over 50% of the population are highly stressed to where it's affecting them. And that's globally in the workforce out there. So there is a high majority of individuals that are really affected by stress in their lives.
And again, the cost, I mean, I'll put it this way, I guess, what kind of symptoms are you expecting to see, and then how does that affect the life, how does it affect the life of a company even?
Well, for sure, now I know we're doing this program in Canada, but in the U.S., the U.S. Labor Department said, what is stress costing the economy? And they determined it was $7,500 per employee per year, or $300 billion.
And what is that, just less productivity, basically?
Well, absolutely. Sick days, my illness, my wellness, as far as my ability to be immune to diseases. You guys we're more ill, we're not as vibrant. Stress affects my cognitive abilities, all these abilities to even concentrate or to, think about it, some people, if you're under stress, my ability to stay focused and be able to do what I need to do and bring my best. All of that has affected me. Some of you out there, when you're stressed, does it make you a little bit more irritable, a little bit less desirable to work with? So all of these things are inputting into our system, and we need to take responsibility for it.
Okay. So somebody watching right now saying, well, I mean, yeah, I know, Ken, I've got a lot of stress, but I'm okay. I'm a big boy. I'm handling it okay. What are some of the symptoms that you're not handling it okay?
Well, I mean, we talk about different things, physical, biological, behavioral. So I could be more irritable, as I mentioned. I could have headaches. I could have backaches.
Okay.
I could be losing sleep. Insomnia will come into that. Weight gain or weight loss. All of those are contributed from stress because stress really is not supposed to be in our body.
Okay. It's a foreign object, yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
It's interesting. Now, I mentioned again some of the things that cause stress, and we probably should come back and talk about some of those things. For example, maybe just having too much of a workload, so much going on, multitasking and so forth, again, or maybe some of the health issues. I was actually somewhat surprised to see some of the things that you had listed as causes of stress. It's just interesting. For example, you talked about living a life that you're always trying to please somebody else. Maybe not the first thing I'd think about when it comes to something that causes stress, or labeling others as, that's, the kind of person I'm working with here. Well, he always does that, and he's a meanie or whatever. That actually causes stress. That's interesting. And again, it comes back to some of the personality types as well.
Well, what we did in the Stress Indicator and Health Planner, and there's 3 co-authors of the tool, is we helped to segment stress into 120 questions into 5 different factors so that you could focus on what was contributing it for you. So we really help outline that for individuals. And one of those areas, interpersonal relationships. And so if you have stress in interpersonal relationships, it affects people differently, just as we talked in the last show. Why aren't you more like me? And why aren't you more like me.com? And you can go get the book and learn about it. For some people, certain things stress them differently. So it could be that I am saying yes and I'm playing a victim, and my personal style is not allowing me to be assertive. And so all of a sudden I'm doing roles, I'm doing things that I really don't want to do, and I'm deferring to that, and that is stressing me. And so, or other individuals where they are maybe a bit of a bully.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So the person you were just describing, is that the kind of person who just doesn't know how to say no?
Well, they need to learn to say no and to stand up for themselves, and it's piling up for them.
Okay.
Or the other one is God asks us not to be offended. And so offense, we've all had at one time or another, maybe road rage. In New York, they now have sidewalk rage. Hey, that's stress. And so when we get offended, and the root word of offend is bait, so Satan has baited us into it. So nobody can offend us unless we let them. So I want everybody that's watching, if you've been in a workplace where somebody has kind of ticked you off, well, that's stress for you. That is having chemicals go into your body that's negatively affecting you. And so we have to take responsibility for our space in those interpersonal relationships. Maybe it's your significant other, maybe it's your kids. I've seen that. It's amazing, Paul. Have you ever been into a grocery store where a 3-year-old can take an adult completely out of it? And they say, if you keep acting like that, I'm going to leave you here. Well, that's stress for the 3-year-old, but also for the parent, where they have just lost control. And that's not a good thing.
For sure. I know some of you can relate to that. Me too. Me 3. Okay, so talking about stress today, we want to get some answers how to deal with it and how to live a much less stressful life. I'm all for that. Boy, sign me up for that. So we did take our cameras off to the street and just asked everyday people their thoughts on stress when it happens in your life. What do you do about it?
When I'm stressed, oftentimes I just need to try and get away. How I feel, man, I just feel caged in. It's horrible because most of the times I'm stressed during exam week and I'm in the library and there's like no escape, so I get a little bit of claustrophobia. So I try and get outside as much as I can.
Usually I like to do some reading or just hang out with some friends.
Play video games or sleep.
I watch movies. Movies are a real stress reliever for me.
I sit in my bed and don't do too much. Usually have the lights off, play video games, or talk with my fiance.
I usually end up procrastinating. But mostly I'll take a nap or something, just try to walk away from the situation and come back.
All right, how do you deal with stress? And there's different ways to deal with it. Some people have not a healthy way of dealing with it, starting to drink or smoke or eat or whatever, right? Other people get some sleep. That's probably healthier, I would guess. But, we do have different personality styles, different backgrounds and so forth. So any quick thoughts on that?
Well, when people are talking about the different stress, notice that what they were trying to do to relieve the stress was unique to each person. And so I think we need to be in touch with what are those things that really help to relieve the stress for us and pay attention to those clues. For some people, they need to go out to a movie to be able to kind of retreat. Other people, they want to retreat to themselves and read a book and quiet time or sleep. All those things where a parent worked for them. And so I think we need to pay attention to those things.
Okay. Now, I did mention earlier again that we're just maybe doing too much. Is that is that a truth? I mean, is that gonna? I mean, some people are, I guess, happy, doing a lot of things. We're busy. Again, different personality types, right? But activity overload, if you will. I mean, it could be something as simple as good things, like for example, you got basketball practice, you got ballet practice, you got piano lessons, all on the same day with 4 kids, whatever the case might be. Plus, you got to get to the board meeting at church. Whatever. Okay, these are good things, but hello, little red flashing light going on. I think you're doing too much.
Well, one of the components in the assessment is around time stress. Who sets your schedule? So, well, everybody else does. Well, if everybody else does, then you're not in charge of that. So you have to take charge of your space and say, what am I committing to? Now, there was a recent study by Sun Life said, in this, I'm talking to the young people, 18 to 24. Now, I said 50% of the population was stressed. 90% of 18 to 24-year-olds are severely stressed in the population right now.
18 to 24?
18 to 24. Student loans, getting a job, all the expectations.
Okay.
And you were hearing about all this input, multimedia, texting, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 texts in a month. All of this is input where I have this urgency addiction that's going on. I need to find quiet time. God talks about meditating and being a space where I'm just not in the input. And so you're talking about, Paul, is that if I don't create margins, I have no space to be able to release the stress. And so I'm constantly increasing it rather than allowing it. So I'm filling up the cup and it's overflowing. I'm not emptying the cup ever to be able to just decrease or release that stress.
So you would say it's probably a safe bet that those 90% of 18 to 24-year-olds, and again, I mean, that would probably apply to anybody older than that too, is being stressed out, that they have not set margins. So their cup is overflowing. So what do you say to somebody who doesn't know how to set margins? How do you set the margin? What do you do?
It's building the confidence to be able to say no and say, what is it that's really important? And what is this urgency addiction? And we just have to purge. If we think, I have a 16 and 17-year-old, and the last few years have been very busy for us as well. I realize that there's times and seasons of life where you're driving and you're the bus and you're the chauffeur and all those things are going on. But my daughter just recently stopped doing another athletic activity. She says, you know what, it was just too much, Dad. And so
she was okay with that. Yeah, interesting.
She was okay because she was doing 3 different sports. It was just stressing her out because she was also, high in her academics. And that we as parents, especially if you have kids, we need to kind of temper this overwhelming where, they just need time to chill, as they would say, so that we're just not going constantly.
Time to be a kid too.
Absolutely, and just go have some fun. And what are those things that I enjoy doing that God's given me? Just, if it's motorcycle riding or if it's fishing or all these kind of recreational things or just quiet time, have I put that in? I mean, the old saying, many have heard the story, where I put the big rocks into the jar first, and then I put the medium size in, and then the little ones later. So have I prioritized? Have I taken the time to say what are the absolute most important things that are non-negotiable? And then these other things, I'm going to put them in or not. You have to pay attention. Is stress really causing these things to you? Interesting, diabetes now in Canada and the US is 50% of the population are diabetic or pre-diabetic in Canada and the US. That is not acceptable. There's no way that I'm going to have the energy. There's no way that I'm going to have the engagement or the cognitive play if I continue to have that kind of lifestyle.
Right.
I just have to say no.
And typically that's a lot of that can be onset by, again, health issues, but again, too much weight, that sort of thing, too sedentary of a lifestyle. Definitely that plays into it. Now, you mentioned earlier, again, saying no to people, but Ken, if I do that, then those people aren't going to like me as much.
Well, that goes back to one of the items in here, where am I trying to live to please others?
Yeah.
No, am I pleasing God or am I pleasing others? So if I'm a people pleaser, that's another stress where, I'm doing all of this. I get my worth out of what I'm doing for other people versus vertically. And so we have to say, no, I'm doing the best that I can, and I love you, Paul, but guess what? I can't say yes here. And so we're actually doing a disservice to everybody, because I'm going to come to a certain place, and I suspect there are people watching right now where they've crashed. And I know one of our relatives had a nervous breakdown because they continued to do this over and over again, and in the ministry. And a lot of times I'm working with ministers or pastors where they seem to have this obligation, and it seems the congregation is first, not their family, not their health. And yes, we need to serve, and we're called to serve, but do we do it to the detriment of our body and our health? Absolutely not.
Pastors are probably, under a lot of stress, generally speaking, more so than the average Joe, in the public square, for sure. No two ways about it. Now, communication, you were talking about, that's a big part of this here as well. Again, people communicate differently. So, and again, in the workplace, I know you're saying a lot of people are stressed out, and those who aren't stressed out are being stressed out by the people next to them who are stressed out. Now you got to work alongside this person, right? And you mentioned 3 different communication styles here in the Stress Indicator and Health Planner. Okay, and again, you can check it out online, kenkeis.com or crgleader.com. You mentioned assertive style, passive style, and aggressive style. Different ways we communicate.
Well, a lot of times instead of being functional, we become dysfunctional. I remember there was a poster that I had, and there was this football stadium. And on the top of it, it says this is the conference of functional families. And
the conference of functional families.
Functional families.
So anybody show up?
And in the football stadium, in this image, were 2 cars, and there was only 2 families in the middle of it. And in the bottom, it says, and these 2 families are in denial. And so all of us have stuff that we have to deal with. And so part of the responsibility is, first of all, I need to acknowledge that stress is affecting me. I need to knowledge around these conversations. Am I passive aggressive? Am I being assertive? Am I actually causing stress in other people where it gets so built up, you have this irritability, you have where people don't really want to be around you? That is not what God's asking for. Can I be peace is actually the opposite of being stressed. So am I in peace? Am I calm? The Spirit is never anxious. So anxiousness should not be part of our demeanor. And so being quiet in the Spirit, and just even if we just think about it right now, these other communication styles come out because I am dysfunctional.
The Cancer Society's annual Jail and Bail happening again, coming up next week. This will be Thursday and Friday from 9 till 4 at the Center Village Mall. Now, if you'd like to get involved and maybe nominate someone, to get arrested for a very good cause, you can give them a call, 317-4655, 317-4655. Of course, the idea is to get people voluntarily, quote-unquote, arrested and put in a public jail at the mall, and then they'll have to make a few phone calls to raise enough bail money to get free. It's always a good idea to nominate your boss, if your relationship with your boss is good. With the bail money, of course, going to benefit the Canadian Cancer Society. Next week, Thursday and Friday, January 17th to 18th from 9 till 4 at the Center Village Mall. So you can give them a call, 317-4655, 317-4655. And that's today's Local Life.
Community leaders, pastors, event organizers, missionaries. We want to know about your inspiring story or event happening in Southern Alberta. Call the Insight team at 403-380-3399 or email insight@miraclechannel.ca. Local Life is your connection to Southern Alberta.
All right, we're continuing with our conversation on stress, what causes stress for you, how do you deal with that stress, and again, love to hear from some of you who have been successful at it. Some people are better than others, to be honest, at handling stress, and you can see it. You observe their life going, that person has a level of peace around them. Other people are, it's just a level of anxiety that's almost contagious and sometimes irritating to be around. And, and again, it's just, the person is not equipped to do that. It's not that they're a bad person. It's not what we're saying at all. So love to hear from those of you who are struggling with it and wanting some answers, or those of you who have found some answers, all right? How to decrease stress, how to deal with it. There's always going to be stress, but I think we can make some plans to actually, so we have less stress in our life, all right? So 1-888-816-2545. We do have lines open right now, anywhere in Canada or even beyond that. If you're watching in the States, you can join us too. Or you can drop us an email, insight@miraclechannel.ca. Again, the book that we have today highlighting is a stress indicator and health planner. This little pamphlet here, very handy for individuals or also for a lot of corporations that Ken Keis is dealing with and helping them. There's some great surveys to complete in here and some good advice on how to handle what you'll discover about yourself in that process. The other book that I think ties in with this actually in a significant way is, of course, the personality types that we have. And that book's called Why Aren't You More Like Me? Okay, and we all have different personality types. And certain things we need to learn how to deal with the other people we're working with, living with. It's going to go a long way to help you in that. KenKeis.com or CRGleader.com. Ken, let's, I want to talk a little bit about, before I take a phone call here, about work stress. Again, it's interesting you're saying a lot of the stress that we deal with in life, for most of us, probably the majority of it's actually happening in the workplace, which is interesting. So do you have any specifics? Because I know there's different ways of dealing with stress, different situations, but if you're in the workplace, I guess what are the most typical stress situations that come up, and what kind of tips do you have specifically for the workplace to deal with those factors?
Well, let's set the baseline for individuals. Is the last research is that the #1 factor that was contributing to our stress is the work.
Okay.
So that's a Canadian research that said that work is what's contributing to our stress. The other number, which is sort of sad, and we talked about in the last show, is that 80% of people dislike what they do, from mildly irritated to loathe.
80%.
And 1/3 of Canadians hate their job.
Whoa.
So there is nothing that you and I can teach right now is if I hate and loathe my job, then what can we give you to be able to reduce that stress? Well, one of the things that we have to take responsibility for is that each of us have assignment, each of us have a calling, each of us have a purpose. So my purpose is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. In our work, and tools and resources and assessments contribute to that. So my challenge for individuals there, if the workplace is completely stressing you out and you're doing something you dislike, then make some choices. I was recently working with an organization. An individual had been promoted into a position, and they said, okay, great, promotion, I'm going to do this new job. It wasn't a fit for him whatsoever. And so after 6 months, 8 months, 12 months of not doing a good job, he was a great employee in the previous position, but was promoted into something that didn't fit for him. And just recently, they had a conversation, and he was either going to be fired or he was going to resign. And they had a conversation, you know what? I don't like this job either. I'm miserable. And what they realized is that they made a mistake by promoting into a job that didn't fit for him. So everybody watching here, you need to take the responsibility. I know some people live in fear, and we're not supposed to live in fear about, well, if I quit this job, I don't know if I can find another one. Well, get a pathway and be clear about what is your assignment and get in the right position. There's no job strategy or stress strategy unless I'm in something that I'm really enjoying doing. I've now been doing this for 24 years, done 2,500 presentations around the globe. And somebody says, don't you get tired? I says, no, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so God's really called us for an assignment. Take responsibility for that. And somebody I recently talked to, many have heard of the What Color's Your Parachute books, have been out years and years. And Dick Bowles has been around he's 80 now. But one of his friends said, I said to him, I said, why are so many people don't like what they do and still stressed in the workplace? And he said, here's the reason, Ken. They're not willing to do the work. They're not willing to do the investigation. They're not willing to do the clarity about what has God really called me to do? Because he has a purpose. You have interests, gifts, talents, and abilities, and that's where a lot of this stuff is coming out of. And are you in work that really is just playing to it? He has created you for a reason, and every single person here has a purpose. And if I'm not tied into that, that is going to be stressful. Because every day I'm going to go to that job and I say, I don't like this. And it's going to burden you. And then we have other choices. We work with individuals who are maybe not the best bosses. And we all have a choice, Paul. I know we've heard it over and over that nobody controls your attitude except for you. And so we need to go to the Spirit. If I work for somebody who is not all that nice to work for, guess what? I can own my space, I can own my attitude, and I need to kind of let that go. And I said, God, I'm really not liking this job. Spirit, reveal to me where you need me to go. And so those become strategies. And the other one is be aware how, am I getting codependent? Is my identity tied up in what I do versus who I am? And so we see it a lot of times where self-worth affects stress levels because how I get my approval from other people around me, the approval at work, the quality, yes, we need to do a good job. But if I'm doing the work for approval instead of contributing and for my purpose, then it's the wrong motivation. It's the wrong purpose that I'm doing it for. And so I just want to encourage people is that you're doing it to serve him, and you don't have to worry about what other people think. We talked about that earlier in interpersonal relationships, but that also occurs in the workplace that, oh, if Paul would just like me, then I would be better. And so we're so busy worried about what other people think and looking around me versus doing the best that I can in that space.
That's great advice right there. This little piece you just did here, that's gold. It really is. I think a lot of people need to just, what did Ken just say here? You know what? And apply it to your life. That's very, very good stuff. That is going to relieve a lot of stress in your life.
And I'm just being, there's one other thing that I just want everybody to listen, that sometimes, and I have it in the book Wired for More Like Me, and we mention it in the Stress Indicator Health Planner as well, is that society has said to us is that ambition means we need to be upwardly mobile. And I want to push back is that if you're in the zone, if you're in the perfect job right now that is serving you, then you get to stay in it. We think that promotion is the only place that I can serve at the best level. No, 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 no. That's society that's put out. If you are the best customer service rep, being a supervisor might not be what you're called to do.
Exactly.
And so some of us are not equipped. And so the ability to actually, we talked earlier, I can say no to opportunities. So there's opportunities that put in front of us, and it's my fault. I've said yes to it. It wasn't somebody else pushing me into it. And so I encourage you that if it doesn't feel right, if it's, again, we go back to that place of peace. If it's not resonating at a really calm, peaceful place for me, then I need to question, is this the right direction for me?
Yeah. It comes back to, again, a relationship with God and taking the time to actually hear God. You've got to do it. Okay, KenKeis.com or CRGleader.com. You can check out some of these books that Ken was just talking about, some of the materials that will help you on the way. Off to Saskatchewan, we'll talk to Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, how are you?
Well, thanks.
Very good. I appreciate a lot of what your guest is saying today. Was just going to maybe share a situation I had when I was in a stressful work position. And I had a new supervisor that was raised by military, so he was a nice guy and everything, but he was just so type A and was constantly kind of breathing down your neck. And I already had a bit of a stressful job as it was in customer service. I like customer service, but it was it was a numbers game. And also I had something going on in my personal life. I was exposed through church. Ironically, somebody came to church that was interested in me that was really troubled, and I believe very dangerous. And so I was to the point, stress-wise, that I actually had pains in my heart. I was involved in ministry as well. I was just very busy. And I learned in music school, through Bible school, that music is very powerful. And so I was in Shoppers Drug Mart picking something else up, and I saw a relaxation musical CD. And I thought, what do I have to lose? I have to do something here. I can't quit my job. I can't control this other individual in my life, and so I purchased this musical CD that was just piano music and nature in the background, and I played that regularly, and I started just going for walks on my breaks, and even if it was cold out, just getting bundled up, and early in the morning, before work, I would go for a 20-minute walk by the water, and that and the music, I started taking 24-hour period every week, once a week, which is like a Shabbat, like a Jewish tradition that's scriptural for our body, and consistently took that 24-hour period every week, and I still try to do that. And what a difference. I stopped getting pains in my heart. My stress level went down probably at least 50%. And so the power of beautiful, relaxing music and just nature, being out in nature, exercising, catching some fresh air, going to funny movies. There's just a number of things you can do. And then taking one 24-hour period consistently every seventh day. The studies show our body has a rhythm, and if you don't take one day a week, in addition to a little bit of time each day for yourself, if you don't take that that one day and just really rest and get unplugged,
Well,
then
appreciate you sharing
your
that,
body,
Sarah.
your body suffers. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice what you just shared there again, and the results were there. The proof is in the pudding that your stress levels dropped significantly. So thanks for that. And you would say she's on the right track?
Absolutely. And when you think about music, he also, in Psalms, it says praise him. And so a lot of times what we do is we focus on what's wrong in our life. And all the research around neurology is that we can actually change our memory engrams and just we work it over. The latest work around counseling is don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution. So if we have some stressful situations like this relationship, if we don't focus on what we can do, then we get burdened and we continue to stack it onto ourselves. So be thankful, be praiseworthy. It pushes back on all these things. Use music, notice walking, again, which is a type of exercise, and be able to work on what you can do versus what you can't.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. 1-888-816-2545. We do have lines open here if you have some advice like Sarah did there. And again, there's different ways of dealing with stress. It doesn't have to be exactly what Sarah said, but I'd love to hear from you because I'm thinking it's going to help somebody out there watching going, I'm not sure what to do. Okay, I'm going to try that, okay? And if you're not sure what to do in your life right now, call and ask, okay? So let's go to another phone call here. Michael from Ontario. Hi, Michael.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
You know, you're so right with this regarding the living to please people. I see it as a millstone around our necks that will eventually drown us, because I was like that very much from the time I was a child. Another reason the reason I believe our Messiah was not stressed out in the garden is because he knew the Father. And so that became my desire to know my Father, to get out of this stress. I made a couple quick notes here that I would like to share, and hopefully it'll help someone else as I work through this PTSD stuff. On July 16, 2000, my big rig was involved in a horrific crash in Manitoba where a 27-year-old pro hockey player died under my truck. In 2001, I was diagnosed with acute post-traumatic stress disorder and retested in 2003, and there was no change. As I refused to take drugs for this, in 2006, I released this to God to renew my mind as promised and to heal my brain. I simply went to the manufacturer for my life warranty. The Bible says to be anxious for nothing, to be content, and that it is my Father's desire to take care of all my needs. I've trained myself not to lose any sleep over things I have no control over, and very, very little over those things that I have some control over. I get stronger and healthier every day as I practice to live out of the kingdom of God, as His ways are so much higher, peaceful, and productive than mine.
Okay. No, that's good advice coming from Philippians chapter 4 there as well. Quite interesting. I mean, a good summary of that is, don't worry about anything, pray about everything.
And he makes a good point. You know what? If as believers, we have to be in the Word to be able to receive those promises. And, we're not to worry about anything. And so if you're worrying about your kids, you're worrying about the weather, is that still worry? And so it's still a little bit. And to develop ourselves, just like an athlete, an Olympic athlete, they didn't get there by accident.
No, we have to practice it.
We're not going to get to these spaces of being worry-free unless we're in the Word, unless we're practicing it, unless we're doing these activities. Just to say, okay, just take it away right now. You know what? You spent a lifetime grabbing a hold of your worry and controlling it. And so I appreciate his comment is that God will renew us. And so that's one of the things that we have as believers. When I work in secular companies, we don't teach that. But what an awesome plug-in that we have into as he mentioned, the master, to be able to have his Spirit just to calm us. And so that's one of the critical pieces that we need to, as believers, to embrace.
Well, I think worry is, Proverbs 12, verse 25 talks about anxiety in the heart of man causes depression. Very interesting statement. I'm not saying it's the only cause of depression, but it's clearly one of the main causes of depression. And again, like I say, focusing on the situation rather than focusing on the solution, which generally speaking is Jesus. Now, obviously uses people to bring solutions as well, works through people, but again, always got to have our heart turned upward, toward Jesus, toward His Word, what's going on there and so forth, all right? So, Ken Keis, our guest here today, author of Why Aren't You More Like Me? That's the personality traits book, and also a pamphlet called The Stress Indicator and Health Planner. Again, helping people and companies actually deal with stressful situations, how to recognize them, how to deal with them. KenKeis.com or crgleader.com there. And lines open right now, 1-888-886-2545. Love to hear your solutions that are working for you to deal with stress. Or any questions you have on how to deal with stress, or how to prevent it from happening. Maybe that's part of it too, preventative. An ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. There's some truth in that as well, right? So, or you can just email us, insight@miraclechannel.ca. Come to think of it, any quick things that pop into the mind that way as far as, when the stress is there, okay, here's how we deal with it, but what are some ways we can prevent some of this stress? Because some of it is clearly preventable, right?
Well, when we started the show, we really believe in a holistic model. So if people go online and take the online assessment and you benchmark yourself, there's 120 questions in there.
Yep.
So it's not any single item. And so we categorize it into 5 different areas. So we talked about interpersonal communications. And so one of the things, before you can do something to go forward, you need to benchmark. So I said, well, I'm not feeling well. What do? You go to the doctor and they get your blood pressure. You get your HDL or LDL cholesterol levels. You benchmark it to determine. So one of our recommendations is that you get some kind of assessment. Ours is one. Determine what are the things that are causing stress for you before I go forward. So interpersonal, we talked about some of the wellness ones, and foods, and God created all these live foods. So be in the live foods, be in the vegetables, be in the fruits, be in the nuts, be in all those kinds of things. And we do highly believe that food does affect these capabilities. There's now research that my cognitive abilities, my ability to handle stress decreases as my lifestyle choices go down. Get the sleep, drink water. If you have 14 cups of coffee, guess what? You're wired on caffeine. And a friend of mine, she was, this is years and years ago, she was going to the University of Saskatoon. She had to quit as a student because she was drinking 3 pots of coffee a day. So much caffeine had got into her system that she couldn't even function anymore as part of that.
That's like being on pot.
It's
pot
absolutely,
of coffee.
exactly. So we use these sort of addictive pieces there. We talked about time and margins. Guess what? I have to take responsibility for my schedule. So I look at all those different items and what am I allowing in my life? He was mentioning earlier that we're being people pleasers. And as part of it, we want to be liked by other people. That's true. And it's not, we're not saying you're going to be rude or abusive to anybody. We're still going to be in love. We're going to be kind. But you know what? The reality is you can't please everybody. And so you just have to give that up. You have to just forget that. And when we talk about work, one of our previous callers said, well, I can't quit. Well, that's actually not true. I can still quit. What do you mean we can't quit? He can provide all our needs. And if I'm in a position that is completely destroying my body because of all the different environmental factors, guess what? He doesn't want that for you. So there are other choices, other options, and allowing ourselves to be open to those different places. So we talked about being quiet, being praiseworthy, being in the Word on those areas, taking responsibility for my lifestyle choices. You put into your body. Now, you might need some help. And we were talking to one of your staff members who has lost 105 pounds in the last year.
Wow.
And so she had a revelation from the Holy Spirit. You know what? My body's a temple. I need to take responsibility for that. And so as ambassadors of Christ, we are actually demonstrating to others really the power of what our relationship is with Him. So I want to challenge believers out there is that, you know what? By not taking responsibility for these things, we're not really demonstrating His power. We're being defeated. And so just standing in all of the things that He has for us. And I have to admit, this is a revelation for me just over the last few years, is that I don't have to struggle on these things on my own.
Well, that's a good point. How important would community be? Because the interesting thing is about community. Some of us want help. Some of us maybe aren't so. Our personality doesn't like help from other people.
That's absolutely critical. There's some new research out is that the amount of friends and people that you have around you increases people's survivability from cancer, increases people's length of life. And so that God said, be in community, right? And so if I'm insular and on my own, a lot of depression, people who are depressed, what do? They remove themselves from their community, which then contributes more to their condition. So there was a research study done where a UBC professor, University of British Columbia, gave people $5. And they said, I want you to take this $5 and spend it on yourself or give something to a friend. without a doubt, every single person who took the $5 and spent it on somebody else, their happiness level went up.
Interesting.
And so, you know, it's biblical. It's
Okay.
better to give than receive.
Yeah.
2020, or ABC's 2020 program, did a program about volunteerism. And they had these individuals who were not that happy. And so they were kind of depressed. And the stress, you know, if you're not happy, if you're not joyful, that is stressful for people. And what happened is they took these individuals and they thought they were going to read to grade ones. They were going to work in the food line. They were going to hand out bags of food to the homeless, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were helping other people. What they didn't realize is they were the subjects of the study. And every single person that went out to give to other people that were less fortunate, their happiness, their joy, their stress went down, but their happiness and joy went up.
Isn't that cool?
And so if you have some stuff and you're really kind of struggling, go find somebody else who's less fortunate than you. Go step out and start giving to them.
Well, that is really cool. It's funny. I was just reading this morning, I think it was Psalm 41 or 42, something like that. David talking about, again, you know, he who considers the poor. Isn't that interesting? And then it talks about the blessings that God pours out in that. Boy, you know what? There's something that God loves about that. Let's take an email here from Louise. Says, when I get super angry, I have to constantly battle the need to say every curse word I can think of. I know that this will not accomplish anything, but I feel a sense of stress relief when I let them out. Do you have any other ideas that I could try to deal with my anger? Well, thank you for that, Louise. Appreciate the honesty in that. Okay.
Nobody makes you angry unless you let them. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is that we have to take responsibility for our responses.
Okay.
And so this is a response mechanism where we've trained ourselves. When somebody says that, I'm going to get hooked.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I need to manage that. Now, Dr. Gottman, who has a marriage seminar company out of Seattle, he did some studies. And what he did is he created the Love Lab, and when couples were in conflict, and what he confirmed is when our heartbeat gets over 100 beats per minute, non-athletic, I no longer am rational. And so we talk about different personalities. When we allow ourselves to be angry and we get over 100 beats per minute, I will say things and do things that are not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things he teaches is that I need to calm myself. And so whatever it is that's hooking you, first of all, we need to go to the root cause and say, what is that people are doing? This is our issue when nobody makes you angry.
Because it's probably a pattern, right?
It's absolutely a pattern.
Okay.
And so this is a mindset. There's several books out there. There's a book from a non-believer, but he's a psychologist, called Feeling Good. It's older.
Okay.
And if you go through it and you read through the different pieces, there's about 500 pages at 2-point font. So there's just thousands and millions of words in this little book. But what he teaches in that is that my response now has been trained. I've trained myself to do it. So I need to untrain that. And the other thing is, as we know, is that if I'm responding in anger, I'm going to say things and do things that are not going to be appropriate. I need to remove myself. I need to calm myself and come back into it. And so it's being disciplined enough to get out of it.
Well, you know, and I would encourage you too, Louise, in some ways. I mean, I think God's okay, because we do see it in Psalms where David actually expresses anger toward God as well. You know, and again, God's big enough to handle it. You know, I'm not saying you need to swear at God, but release that anger to God. I say, you know what? He's your best friend. You say, here's why I'm feeling angry, God. And then, you know, dump it off with Jesus. I think he's going to help you with that. But again, you're talking about practically speaking, give yourself some time to cool down. That's a very, very practical stuff. It really is.
And just manage. I mean, Jesus got upset with the money changers too, right?
Yep.
And so there's frustration. All of us will have frustration. But the key is that can I be aware of it, but also look, what is the things, the triggers that are hooking you?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's take a phone call from Ontario. Brianna, you're on the air with Ken Keis. Go ahead.
I think my question is, if you are dealing with family members that are non-Christian, and they're showing narcissistic, type A, very aggressive personalities, what is the response of a Christian, and where's the line that should you excommunicate them, or should you be the bright light, or like I'm not certain where that, if their stress is overwhelming. What is there any advice that you can give?
Great question, Brianna. Thanks.
Well, one of the questions I have back to Brianna is what is it that's stressing you about that situation? What is it that's bothering you?
It's the words and the things that are coming out of this person's mouth that are so disturbing, very upsetting.
Can you be specific? I mean, they're talking about themselves. You said they're narcissistic, right? So they're kind of bragging, that sort of thing?
Not breaking, but verbally bashing other family members, and really, I mean, I couldn't even repeat some of the things on air that are being said, but just really wanting to know where the line is, and what, you know, I mean, I've prayed about this. Do I stop talking with this person? You know, if I'm the only Christian in this family, you know, I may be the only light shining. Just looking for some advice on where and how you would maybe use wisdom to try to decide when enough is enough.
Okay, Ken?
Well, you know, everything is situational, and so there's context in here, and so there's both sides to this coin, is that we want to be a light. We want to be connected to that. But you also want to know when too much is too much for you. And so if it's getting to its overwhelming, and so how do you manage the interaction? And the other thing is, we were mentioning to the previous email, is that where do you get hooked? Is that we know that they're not saved. They're not going to be having conduct that's becoming. And so we just know that going in. So we don't let it upset us, but we demonstrate a way that is calming. We don't participate in the conversation, meaning we don't, well, you shouldn't be saying that, is we go into a place where we just change the subject. We go into an area where I don't feed the fuel or fuel the fire.
Don't give him the response maybe he's even looking for, right?
Exactly. And so it's not that we're ignoring them, but we're redirecting it. We're redirecting into how Christ wants us to act. And then you will know about how much can I go into that situation. Excommunication? Probably, no, not at all. Is that we want to be that light. And guess what? We pray for those individuals. We demonstrate His Spirit in us when we're interacting with them. And you know what? It could be 5 years, 10 years. How long? You know, faith is persistent. Never gives it up.
Hey, Brianna, I encourage you to, you know, well, if you study Romans chapter 12, for example, again, talks about living at peace with all men as much as it depends on you. And of course, this is not, you can't control all of that. And that verse talks about that. But verse 21 talks about overcoming evil with good. And that's easier said than done. But, you know, again, just to ask God for grace there. And again, I think maybe sometimes you have to limit your time with that person for your own sanity as well. It's a place for that too, I think. So let's go to Kristen's email briefly. I don't think it's possible to live my life without being stressed. When I find myself with nothing to do, I tend to feel guilty, and I stress out because I should be doing something. I can't seem to find the balance that I need to live a normal life. Any suggestions? All right.
Well, first of all, let's get rid of this idea that I can't do anything about it. Because if I believe I can't do anything about it, guess what? It's going to be true. So first of all, say you can. There's another word that was in that email, Paul, said guilt. And the last time I checked is that guilt is something that we're not supposed to be in. Let that go. So what is causing that guilt? What's the expectation about it? So part of this is your belief system or your thinking is contributing to that stress. So you have to filter through it. Why are you feeling guilty? We're not supposed to feel guilty. And there's a lot of people who feel guilty for all kinds of reasons. And religion can put all those kinds of oppressions. You know that, Paul, is that I feel guilty. I didn't pray enough today. You know what? That's just Satan messing with us. Grace is there. His love is there. We have all those pieces. So I just want to encourage you that, first of all, get rid of that belief system, is that you can resolve this. The steps you need to take will be very personal. You know, so those are some of the things that we can work on. You know, go through maybe the stress indicator and health planner and find out what some of the things are.
Absolutely. Well, man, here we are, almost out of time again. My goodness.
Just like that.
If you got like just a very brief, just a recap here, what people can take home here today.
Well, I mean, obviously we have a bias. We've done our life's work is around creating the stress indicator and health planner, around 120 questions to get people anchored, create a benchmark. So that's something they can go to crgleader.com and to do it. And
we'll probably have to leave it there. So crgleader.com. Do check it out. Some great resources there. I'm sorry we're out of time. Ken, it was great.
Is that right? Well, it's always fun.
Thank you for your calls. Appreciate it. Okay. Man, it's been fun. Tomorrow's show, we're going to actually talk about where's God when evil strikes. We've seen some evil stuff over this last year. Steve Wohlberg's our guest on that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on where's God in all that stuff.